Greetings, dear friends. I present to your attention the most common malfunctions and breakdowns that occur on the Kia Rio. I must say right away that when choosing a Kia Rio 3, you cannot particularly bother with the choice of engine. The difference in acceleration dynamics between 1.4 and 1.6 is minimal, and the technical differences between these two motors are so negligible that it is simply impossible to determine the unit outwardly. You can't see the crankshaft, but you can't see the connecting rods indiscriminately. Not everyone can decipher the engine model on the sticker, which in fact is used by many scammers who sell 1.4 under the guise of 1.6, in the hope that the buyer simply does not look at the right column in the TCP. And it's very easy to miss. The resource of both engines is also particularly the same. Even despite the fact that the manufacturer has declared a maximum millage of 180 km, in practice, the piston engines of both engines travel at least 230 km, and with a responsible approach to maintenance, all 300,000 km. In short, the Rio loves a good 95 gas and an oil change every 10 km. Before their last days, the units may require you not very expensive, but still attention. For example, by 100,000, an unscheduled, I would even say unexpected replacement of an extended chain and quite a routine adjustment of valve clearances may be needed. The catalytic converter, catalyst, also crumbles to this point and the risk of crumbs being drawn into the combustion chamber increases, which caused premature piston wear in a number of owners. At the first sign of a lost traction and an error in the efficiency of the catalyst, you will have to take care of removing it and flashing the ECU, or an expensive replacement of the converter, otherwise you can spend even more. The Kia Rio 3 engines are not very picky about the climate, however the units are painful when the arrow drops to -20. They do not always start, especially with a standard battery. One way or another, you can warm up the car and there is no risk of breakdown, which cannot be said about the tendency of Rio motors to overheat. In our Urals, this is rare, but in the regions to the south they complain that if the radiator is not flushed every season, then the risk of frying the engine increases many times over. The cooling system is already designed end-to-end, and then there is dirt, bent radiator cells, and insects that interfere with heat transfer and reduce reliability. Oil leaks disturb Rio units extremely rarely. Sometimes they snort only the front crankshaft, oil seal, and the valve cover. Do not strain your head too much for applicants for used Kia Rio 3 and with the choice of gearbox. If you want an automatic, take it. You will not regret it. There are almost no problems with hydromechanics if you periodically change the oil, but when buying a used Rio, it is better to check the mechanical box thoroughly, switching all gears during a test drive. The weak point of the transmission is the third speed synchronizer. If you hear a crunch when you turn it on, then look for another car or ask for an appropriate discount on the capital of the checkpoint. Up to 150 km, there are almost no clutch problems if you use it properly. Some pass even 200,000 with a native clutch, largely due to the delay valve for smooth switching, which helps the driver not to burn the basket and kill the gearbox ahead of time. Resource of the chassis of the Kia Rio does not raise any questions. The behavioral features are more disturbing. How many complaints there were from angry owners who almost lost control on the track due to too soft rear shock absorbers allowing the stem to sway from side to side, accompanying loss of control. They live long enough. There are no questions about this. There's just the desire to change them to more hard, non-original ones arises almost immediately after buying a car, which is what the owners of Rio or Solaris are doing. Let's return to the reliability of the chassis. The weak point in the suspension, perhaps, is the front wheel bearings. They begin to backlash after 30 to 40 km. Just don't be in a hurry to replace them. It is possible that you can get by with tightening the fastening knot and travel at least the same amount. Stabilizer bushings are in second place. The resource is approximately 100 tkm. The silent blocks of the front levers on the third 130 to 150 tkm. The bone ones are practically not killed. They calmly hold on to 250 tkm each. Front shock absorbers fully work on average the first 100,000 kilometers. Nothing ever happens to the rear bearing, which was initially clear even when getting acquainted with the design, if such a simple device can be called that. Breakdowns are excluded. Steering, unfortunately, I can praise in any way. Prestigious. Even if we discard the cases of early leaks of power steering pumps, which were eliminated under warranty, then there is still something to complain about. For example, the steering rack. One gets the feeling that the manufacturers conspired and buy the steering assembly from one supplier, which in turn completes the mechanism with low-quality guide bushings. In the case of Rio, knocks can be heard out of 40 tkm. The only thing that pleases is the maintainability, which is inherent in all the mechanisms of the model. So the rail can be silenced relatively inexpensively. The main thing is to find a good specialized service. Despite a fairly productive power steering system, one day Rio 3 may puzzle the owner with a tight steering wheel. You should not worry too much about this, because the weak point is eliminated simply and only by lubricating the cardan of the steering shaft. The most important thing is not to delay the solution of the problem. Otherwise, after the loss of the amplification effect, the knocks of a worn cross will still appear, because of which the latter will only have to be changed. Steering tips safely live up to 100,000 kilometers, and then it will depend on the accuracy of the driver and the operating conditions of the car. The paintwork of the Kia Rio, which is expected for a budget car, is weak and does not like absolutely any contact. It is easily scratched, from which it is already difficult to call a car fresh from an aesthetic point of view by a mileage of 100 tkm. The same can be said about the windshield, which is not distinguished by resistance to rubbing. Over time, Rio, like Solaris, increases the gaps between the front bumper and adjacent body panels. True aesthetics have to change the clips. Sweating headlights are also a popular phenomenon and are not so much a concern for design as for an already not very productive lighting system. Rio also has shows that they are easier to cure yourself than to buy new parts or give money to bottomless currency-absorbing dealers. I'm talking, of course, about the door stops. So weak that they almost completely stop fixing positions by 50 tkm, and the owners have to modify them with a metal rod, which is usually used as an electrode for welding. In general, when determining the mileage by indirect signs, you will have to take this moment into account so as not to boo the seller in vain, accusing him of twisting. It won't be fair. By the way, the mileage here is not duplicated in any of the ECU units, which means that the tricks of scammers by electronic methods cannot be calculated with computer diagnostics. It is better to evaluate the car completely and only after that make a decision about the reality of the numbers on the odometer. It is also worth taking into account that the interior of the Kia Rio itself is not the most wear resistant. The seats, steering wheel, gear shift lever are overwritten earlier than you expect from them. This completes the information about the problems of Kia Rio. If you know more or do not agree with what you heard, I'm waiting for you in the comments.